to Matt Nair on air. Jane Matt Nair, Greg Bach, and our friend and colleague Maggie Dawn coming to you live from our studio in beautiful downtown Waukesha. Make sure you download the Civic Media app. You can listen to all the shows across all the stations, and it gives you the option to call and or text directly. If you ever want to check in with us, you can call or text too at 844-967-2789 or leave a comment on the live stream if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Maggie, Dawn, we haven't seen each other in too long. How are you?
I'm really good, Jane. Nice to be here.
It's great to have you along. I kind of sprung this on you a little bit yesterday, but I think this will be an interesting segment. And if anyone listening has ever thought about being a lawyer or considering going into law, this is your opportunity to talk to a lawyer to find out how to go about this. And the reason why I bring this up, Maggie, is because obviously you've been reading a lot about some of the trials involving our former president. And one of his lead lawyers in the E. Jean Carroll defamation case is Alina Habba, who appeared to be having some problems in court this week with just some basic things on like how to introduce evidence. And that as a non-lawyer, Maggie, to me, that seems bad.
Yeah, not a good week for Alina Habba. I actually just tweeted about this a bit. Apparently, she's been paid over $2 million in legal fees, which is just incredible. Um, Especially given that by any reasonable measure, she has embarrassed herself and by extension, her client in court. Really basic things. Actually, introducing evidence, if I'm going to be fair, can be a little tricky. There are lots of rules about that. Most trial lawyers and myself, when I have been in court, um, I make sure that I know exactly what I'm doing because the last thing I want to do, especially in front of a jury, even when there is no jury in front of a judge, is look foolish or like I don't know what I'm doing because you lose credibility and that matters. It matters if you're trying to build trust and ask people to believe the arguments that you're making. But some of her mistakes, I can almost give her that one. And the judge was really patient about it. But she didn't stand up when she was addressing the court. That's baby lawyer stuff.
That's basic protocol, right? That's just basic protocol.
Yes. I don't know I don't know her legal resume at all, but if you've done mock court or a moot court or mock trial once, you should know that. And almost everyone does that in law school. So I would say that many second-year law students actually understand the trial rules better than Attorney Habba does. I mean, evidently. It's bad.
It's bad. Well, and my whole point is I've always, even as a child, lawyers are really smart people because it's difficult to pass the bar exam is what I've always heard. People fail it 2 or 3 and 4 times because it's so difficult. So let's talk, Maggie, about becoming let's talk about becoming a lawyer and what does it take to become a lawyer. And I'm assuming that first of all you have to decide on what kind of law that you want to practice. Is that accurate?
No. Great. That is a perfect introductory question, Jane, because a lot of people are under the misapprehension that you actually have to know what sort of law you want to practice before you go into law school. I would actually say that most people have no idea in reality, what law they should practice or what law they would be good at practicing at. And you come in with all kinds of preconceived notions about what you might do, and most of them are dispelled fairly quickly. You have to have an undergraduate 4-year accredited degree. It doesn't matter what the degree is. I would actually tell most people thinking about becoming a lawyer, don't go get a criminal justice undergraduate degree. It will not help you at all in law school. It also, unless you become a district attorney or a criminal defense lawyer, it won't help you at all when you become a lawyer. And very few lawyers actually practice in the criminal court system. So again, you can really go to law school, at any time with any background, with any undergraduate degree, law school really teaches you a system of thinking. It's not about one fact, two fact, three facts, or these particular legal precedents, although that's what gets tested in the bar exam. So, a lot of us sort of joke that becoming a lawyer and the practice of law are a series of flaming hoops that you jump through that have nothing to do with one another at all whatsoever. Like the LSAT, no relationship to what kind of lawyer you're going to be. The LSAT, generally no relationship to even what kind of law student you're going to be. How well you do in law school, oftentimes no relationship to what sort of lawyer or how good of a lawyer you're going to be. Um, another joke that many lawyers will pass around when we have too many cocktails is people that get C's in law school go on to become really great attorneys. People who get B's in law school go on to become great judges, and those that get A's in law school go on to become law professors. I that is just the way the saying goes. But yeah, anybody can do this. I actually think that many people, when they take the bar exam or the law school admissions test, also known as the LSAT, actually psych themselves out. I think the vast majority of people with an appropriate and reasonable amount of preparation, a good night's sleep, a meal, and a decent cup of coffee will do well enough to pass the bar or to get an LSAT score that'll get you into a reasonably decent law school. I think the bigger question that more people need to ask is, do you know what the practice of law is? And do you know how much debt you're going to have, how you're going to pay that, what kind of income you're going to need? And frankly, the scarcity of jobs as lawyers that pay at that income level.
Oh,
So, right? The market for lawyers is all like butt over tea kettle, meaning the law schools pump out way too many lawyers with way too much debt. There's too many. The supply of those people are is way more than the actual amount of jobs that would be able to provide a reasonable standard of living with those sorts of debt loads. It's a microcosm of the higher education problem writ large.
what are we talking about, Maggie, as far as debt when you get out of law school?
It can be absolutely crushing for many people. I was fortunate enough to attend the University of Wisconsin, which back when I was there in the early 2000s, in-state tuition was, I think, running around $9,000. Now, that doesn't cover books or where you live or any of that,
Sure.
but the tuition price itself was very affordable. I was more blessed to basically have grant funding. They wanted to keep me at Wisconsin. I did really well my first year. They didn't want me exiting and transferring to another law school. So they found grant monies to pay me to stay there. So I was really lucky. But today, I believe University of Wisconsin Law School tuition, even for in-state, is upwards of 20,000 a year. If you go to the Ivies, or any other, what I'm gonna call top 50 law school, I would say you're easily north of 40,000 a year in tuition alone. Books are extraordinarily expensive in law school, and extraordinarily heavy and numerous and lengthy. You're
So you need a Sherpa to go with you to your
Yeah,
classes.
yes, I
An
would
additional
suggest
expense. An additional
right,
expense.
A Sherpa, and listen, nowadays, you have to have l like, it was sort of nascent when I was there. I took notes by hand my first semester of law school, and then I was thought to myself, "I think I can do this more efficiently and more quickly if I take my laptop." But it was back then, it was about 25% of kids in the classes and students used laptops, and the other 3 quarters were still taking notes,
By
I
hand.
by hand. We took all of our exams in blue books, and I mean, law school exams run somewhere in the ballpark, depending on the course, of, between 3 to 4 hours. So you're sitting, and it's basically you're issue spotting and just pumping out everything that you can catch from a question, and it's these long fact patterns. Um, and most people in law school as well, they psych themselves out of the exams. Um, so my advice, and I talk to people thinking about going to law school, and I talk to law students a lot. People thinking about law school, do not go unless you feel personally compelled to go to law school,
So don't do
right?
this. Don't do
It,
this because your family is a family of lawyers and everybody's been a lawyer and I have to be a lawyer now.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it for that reason. I wouldn't do it because I don't know what else to do. I wouldn't do it because it sounds interesting to know. I think you can actually gain the skills that many people learn in law school from a lot of different sources, and probably actually bring together the sort of thinking process that law schools are supposed to be teaching lawyers much better through other means. It's really about critical thinking and trying to predict future outcomes based on past cases. In fact, studies have shown that the best undergraduate degree for potential law students, in other words, the undergraduate major that does the best in law schools, regardless of which law school, is actually economics.
Oh,
And it's because econ and law do basically the same thing. Econ does it with numbers, the law does it with words, and that is you take a disparate amount of data and information that doesn't look particularly related, and based on that information, you try to apply a system, understand what does all of this noise mean, and then use that system to predict outcomes. It's the exact same analytical process in economics as it is in the law.
that's
Um,
fascinating.
so for me, I felt compelled to go to law school because it was the third leg of sort of my trying to understand the world, the third leg of the stool for me to understand the world. The first was economics. The second one was politics and linguistics and history. I'm going to put it sort of in that liberal arts bag.
Hmm.
And then the third one was the law. And once I pulled those 3 things together, I was like, "Okay, I've got some integrated avenues for me to try to understand the world in a comprehensive way with all of its complexity and problems and conflict," right? I enjoyed it. I loved law school.
If you have a question for Maggie, if you're thinking about a career in law, give us a call. Shoot us a text. 844-967-2789, 844-967-2789. You're listening to Matt Nair on Air. This is the Civic Media Radio Network.
She gets mad and she starts to cry. She takes a swing man she can't have. She don't mean no. I'm breaking the rocks in the hot sun. I fought the law and the law won. I fought the law and the
Good morning. Welcome to Matt Nair on Air, coming to you live across the Civic Media Network. Jane Matt Nair, Greg Bach, and our colleague Maggie Dawn on the show today. We are talking about So You Want to Be a Lawyer. And the reason I wanted to ask Maggie about this is because some of the trial room antics that have been going on with one of the former president's cases this week in New York City, and one of his lead lawyers seems to be having some difficulties, and just made me question, how hard can this be? I mean,
Yeah,
seriously, if she can be a lawyer, how hard can this be? Now, you didn't say, Maggie, that the best undergrad degree to have in order to go into law school was theater major, because then I would have been a lock.
you would be shocked, Jane. I actually think people that come from a really robust liberal arts background, performance oriented folks, if you want to do trial work, if you want to get up and make an argument, you have to command attention. You
Yeah.
have to be able to tell a compelling story. I actually have met some of the greatest lawyers who were philosophy majors, theater majors, art history majors. There's an integrated way of thinking, right? If you were in the dramatic arts, you're thinking about character motivation. Where does this fit in the plot line? What was the playwright actually trying to say here? What was the historical context within this? Am I doing an interpretation or am I taking this literally? There's a bunch of thinking going on there. In my view, anything that um, helps prepare people to think about things in an intersectional, um, integrated way, that will serve you well in law school. Being interested in things will serve you well in law
You have to
school.
be
Uh,
curious.
you do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's going to be absolute drudge work.
Yeah. Carolyn from Heartland texting in, listening here on WAUK. What group is paying Trump's lawyer $2 million? Just the fact that she actually got paid, Carolyn, is pretty astonishing.
Yeah, well, it's the regular folks, Jane, that Trump sends out solicitations to. Um, it's when he sent around his mugshot and said, "Send me money." The reason that we know how much she got paid is that it was in the Federal Election Commission filings, which means campaign funds are being used for his legal defense, relating back to events that occurred when he was not in politics, not a candidate, and not president. Pretty extraordinary, if you ask me. I didn't really want to buy a slice of Donald Trump's mugshot suit for $5,000, but apparently some people do.
Yeah.
I don't understand it. If he's a billionaire and has all these gobs of money and relieves himself in a golden toilet, I would be saying pay your own lawyers. But nope.
Yeah, it's that is a pretty astonishing, I guess you'd call it a skill, an ability to.
Yeah, it's called grift,
Well, some,
isn't it? I mean,
some might call it grifting.
some might.
Some
might.
might.
I mean, most people struggle when they listen. All of us at some point in time in our life will need a lawyer. It's hopefully you don't need it until very late in your life, right? In
Right.
other words, you never have to tussle with the criminal justice system. You don't end up in a dispute with your landlord. You don't get divorced. You're not in a custody battle. And the last thing that you think about is like, oh, maybe I should have a decent will or trust set up when I'm leaving this place. But all of us will interact at some point in time or need a lawyer. The sad reality is that the vast majority of that is in the civil practice of law, so not criminal. And no one is guaranteed legal representation when it comes to civil matters. So your divorces, your parking tickets, your landlord-tenant disputes. And the great sadness and the dislocation that I had coming out of law school was that the people that I wished I could help the most could not afford my services. And certainly I could give it away for free, but I gotta eat too.
And you have school loans to pay off. I mean, you can do some pro bono work, but you can't make a life out of that.
And I really got my trial lawyer chops doing pro bono work while I worked at Big Law in New York and abroad, and then in Chicago. I worked on immigration matters. And if you want to see the absolute bottom of the barrel when it comes to lawyers, it's immigration lawyers, because what you set up is this perfect power asymmetry, right? You have someone who's afraid of getting deported or their loved one is in, an ICE facility. Maybe English is a second language. You're completely you don't know the customs, or your family doesn't, and you're trying to find a lawyer. Most immigration lawyers charge a very large retainer fee. And what is that person, that immigrant, to do when their immigration lawyer deserts them, no-shows them, doesn't get it done, doesn't follow up, isn't timely? They don't know how to navigate these systems.
Sure.
It's a setup that is just rife for abuse, and I've heard these stories over and over and over again. So it was really a privilege to practice in the immigration bar for a number of years when I was in New York.
That's heartbreaking. I can't imagine the tragic situations you saw and dealt with, and I would have paid money to see you in court. I would love to see you in court. I think you would rock the world.
I enjoy it. I sort of describe it as like three-dimensional extemporaneous chess with human beings and all sorts of conflicting interests. My favorite witnesses are liar witnesses. It's like, oh, you want to do this? Like, let's roll. Let's go swear an oath. Let's go do the thing in the courtroom. I will eat your lunch. I enjoy it. My second favorite witness is the expert witness that has been bought and paid for. My favorite tactic was basically to like get out all of the textbooks that they've written, which will be annotated with like little flags and all kinds of highlighting all over it, which they have to, once they see it, they're like, oh my gosh, she actually read everything I've ever written.
Oh,
it's going to get bad. Yep. That's fun.
Oh, that would be so delightful.
That was my favorite part of school when I was in, was going to study law and I didn't. But when you do like the mock classroom trials, not mock trial, but just the trials in classroom, I was always like,
Yep.
I want to be the guy. I'm the prosecutor. I'm the prosecutor.
And I'm running
Put
with
him
it.
on the
And I
stand,
would
Judge.
like the 2 times I got to, I just destroyed them.
844
I actually, go ahead,
967
James, sorry.
2789. If you have a question for Maggie, or if you ever want to call and or text 844 967 2789. We have the news coming up, and then when we return, there's a discussion about what the former president wants to do to some of our media companies if he gets reelected. And there are some of us who think this is it's somewhat concerning.
Somewhat
Somewhat
concerning.
A
concerning.
skosh.
A scotch.
Just a scotch.
A scooch. All right. We'll have that when we return. Stay close. You're listening to Matt Nair on Air, coming to you across the Civic Media Radio Network.
Robbing people with a 6-gun. I fought the law and the law won. I fought the law and the law won. I miss my baby and I'm good bug. I fought the law and the law won. I fought the law and the law won. I left my baby and it feels so bad. I guess.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. Matt Nair on Air, Jane Matt Nair, Greg Bach, and our colleague and friend Maggie Dawn from the Maggie Dawn Show, coming to you live from our studio in beautiful downtown Waukesha. Want to give a shout out if you are listening in Wisconsin Rapids on WFHR or FHR rather, or on WLAK in Amory.
Amory.
In case you don't know, Maggie Dawn, Amory is one of my favorite places I've never been. So I've placed all of these wonderful expectations on how perfect and magical Amory is.
I'm telling you right now, this better pan out, lady.
Yeah, there's some mystique I'm catching.
Yeah, I believe this to be my happy place. So eventually we'll make our way up there. We've been talking, it's been in our inaugural segment of So You Want to Be a Lawyer. And I was kind of inspired to ask Maggie to join us because after seeing some of the courtroom work by one of the former president's attorneys this week, and even looking at some of our members of Congress who have law degrees, occasionally, and even though I am not the sharpest knife in the drawer, I make a respectable butter knife. I think that how are these people lawyers? How hard can it be if they can pass the bar exam? So Maggie is kind of taking us through what it takes. Where do you start? If you have a question, 844-967-2789, 844-96.
Party.
Robert from Port Edwards. Good morning, Robert. How you doing? Thank you so very much for joining us. Did you have a question for Maggie?
I do. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Yes. Two words. Rhinestone encrusted Eileen Cannon. And when you folks are referring to people that have taken the bar exam and are in positions of whether it's political or judicial prominence, how did this individual get to where she actually is? And given what's kind of, in my mind, the slow walk for Donald Trump's document case,
Yes.
It just seems to be a travesty to the judicial system. Win, lose, or draw, whether the gentleman's guilty or not, let the court case play out. Don't slow walk this thing off into perpetuity. I guess that's my question, and perhaps a bit of opinion. So you folks are the legal experts, and please enlighten me. I'm very curious on your thoughts here.
Thank
Have
you
a
so
lovely weekend.
You too,
Bye-bye.
Robert. Thank you so very much for listening. Really, really appreciate it. Maggie?
So Judge Eileen Cannon was considered one of the most unqualified judges ever put forward to become an Article 3 federal trial court judge. Article 3 judges are appointed by the president and confirmed by the Senate, and they sit for the rest of their lives unless they are recused or step down. It is very, very, very unusual for the American Bar Association to actually rate a judge as unqualified, and they did so as to Judge Cannon. That is almost unheard of. They will let folks that have reed thin resumes through. It used to be the case that Article 3 appointees were either very experienced lawyers, whether transactionally, but more frequently trial lawyers, that had spent some time generally at the federal level at the Department of Justice, or were academics with very lengthy resumes and a very lengthy history of practice. Trump effectively threw that model out. And what Trump and the Federalist Society recognized was that if you pick really, really young judges while the GOP controlled the Senate,
Yeah.
these judges don't have any record that can really be probed. And since they controlled the Senate Judiciary Committee, the nominations could effectively just be forced through. And that's what you've seen. I mean, even his Supreme Court appointees, I won't say that any of them are unqualified, they weren't. But in relative form, they had less history than many other prior nominations. Read Merrick Garland by Barack Obama at the end of his term. And so the tactic was, well, they won't be able to find anything to actually object to, and it doesn't matter anyways because we control the Senate. And once we get these folks on that have been vetted sort of through the conservative machinery, that is, read the Federalist Society, we'll be able to control these federal courts for decades.
Yes.
Eileen Cannon is younger than I am. I will let you all extrapolate who probably has better legal chops. Now, I could never be appointed to an Article 3 judgeship because I have spoken so plainly and frequently about the problems that I have seen in politics, really starting just before Donald Trump's election. And I knew that that was basically going to end any opportunity that I might have to be a judge, even at the state level. It's if you actually talk plainly about politics and you want to be a judge, forget about it.
Not going to happen.
Right? You saw, I mean, this happened with Justice Protasewicz, right? She observed what is a fact, and that is the maps in Wisconsin are rigged. You can say that they're rigged legally. That's an argument that can be made, right? She didn't say they're rigged unconstitutionally. She said they're rigged. That is a statistical, observable fact. That doesn't mean that she had pre-decided the legal arguments about the constitutionality of rigged partisan maps. The Supreme Court has ruled repeatedly that rigged partisan maps are okay. There is sort of an outward, somewhere out there should be some boundary. That's what that case is really about. But you saw what happened to Justice Protasewicz. It seems like they've abandoned the impeach Protasewicz. Now they seem distracted by the impeach Megan Wolf, even though their own lawyers have told them that that's not legally possible. And I could go on and on. It really wasn't possible in the before times, right? In the pre-Donald Trump era. But it would be impossible now.
No.
And I don't think that I've ever said anything that I wouldn't stand behind. I've engaged in rhetorical speech, but the things that I've said, I've always tried to make sure that they are true and accurate and reflect my legal view of the world. And that has pretty much been consistent since the day I came out of the law school womb.
Well, I would love to see you as a judge. Maggie Dawn with a gavel, you would put that little Patrick McHenry to shame. You could show him how to gavel, baby. If
There are hordes of lawyers shaking in their boots right now when you said that.
if you have a question for Maggie, we're doing So You Want to Be a Lawyer. Maggie Dawn is a lawyer as well as a very talented talk show host. 844-967-2789, 844-96.
Party.
Thank you, Crick Buck.
Party.
Nick from Madison is on the line. Hey, Nick, thank you so much for joining us. What did you want to ask Maggie?
Hey, thank you very much. Maggie, I'm very glad to talk to you because you said something a while ago that really got my goat, and I'd like you to explain it. You said that if a prosecutor comes with a case, or the police come with a case, the prosecutor should just go with it, not worrying about if it's actually a good case, because that's called prosecutorial misconduct. I'm not a lawyer, but that seems like it's me. I'm just a guy who watches Law and Order, but but that
I'm so glad.
really
No, I'm so glad
got
you
my
asked
goat
this
there.
question. Yep, if that's what I said,
Mhm.
I would be mad at me too. So let me
Yeah.
try to actually
Mhm.
reframe what I was saying and be more clear because I totally agree with you. Prosecutors have discretion and it is incumbent upon them in the search for justice, capital J, to not charge crappy cases. What I was trying
Mhm.
to make a distinction between is when prosecutors refuse to bring cases if they have any question about whether or not the case can be won. In other words, they believe the person is guilty of the crime, they believe that they have substantial evidence, but they're not totally sure they can get a conviction. You hear this construction spoken about frequently. In other words, the lawyer themselves makes a guess about whether or not the jury will be able to convict. And that I believe is preservation of batting average as opposed to moving forward even in difficult cases because justice compels it. The through line there in both instances is that I believe prosecutors have a moral and legal duty to pursue justice. And even when they may lose a case, sometimes it is important to press forward with a prosecution. A good prosecutor should never charge or bring charges or see a case to trial if they don't believe in the charges, they don't believe in the guilt of the party, they don't have substantial evidence, they don't believe that they can give a fair question to the jury to consider, and especially if someone's civil rights have been abused. So I hope that allays your concern with what I said. And I actually got a couple of questions about that. So I must have expressed myself really poorly when I said that before. Thank you for asking.
Nick, did that answer your question?
That did actually, and because the thing that I was thinking is that that whole argument that you made is what people could have done in the Deep South,
Yes.
for
Oh,
and that's why I so disagreed with it.
oh gosh, I could not agree with you more. When the whole
Mhm.
power of government is trained upon you as a defendant, one of the last sort of I guess protection is the ethical prosecutor, right? Is the prosecutor
Mhm.
seeking justice? Is the prosecutor not looking to chalk up wins, not looking to become a governor? The prosecutor who is really trying to do the people's work. That is the highest ideal uh, um, of anyone who is in a criminal prosecutorial function. You stand for the state of Wisconsin or the people of the United States, and you do that by seeking justice, not persecuting people, not prosecuting charges that you don't think are meritorious, not by ignoring civil rights violations. Often, good prosecutors actually help ferret out bad cops because they won't put bad cops on the stand because they know that they're not credible. So I'm so glad you asked that question. Thank you. I actually had District Attorney John Chisholm on my show just this past Monday. John spoke at length about this. If you would like to hear more about this, go to civicmedia.us, check out the show podcast for Monday. Thank you for asking.
Thanks a lot, Nick. And we have Tom from West Dallas. Just a couple of minutes left here, Tom. Thank you so much for joining us. Did you have a question for Maggie?
I do. Just a real quick. Daryl Brooks serving 6 life sentences. Why is he being prosecuted again when he's already never ever getting out? What is the point of that?
So I'm not familiar with Mr. Brooks's current criminal case, but in general, let me just say this. When a crime has been committed, part of the job of a district attorney's office is to file charges if they're meritorious and have victims have their day in court to be able to face the person that harmed them if they are still
Mhm.
living. And many of Mr. Brooks's victims are not around. So there are a panoply of charges that he may be faced with. Some of them may relate back to his prior domestic violence issues, some of those earlier charges. Every one of those victims deserves to have um, their perpetrator charged and evidence heard on those cases. So not only does a prosecutor stand for the people of the state of Wisconsin or the United States, they also stand up in the courtroom for victims, and that's extremely important.
Thank you for the call,
Okay.
Tom, and thank you so much for
Thank you.
listening. We're just up against the clock here. Maggie Dawn, it has been such a delight. Thank you so very much for joining us. And I think we will have to do a second round of So You Want to Be a Lawyer.
This
It was great
someone already
fun.
said to have her on every Friday for half an hour to talk about law stuff. So
All
you're
right.
popular.
All right, Maggie Dawn,
Yay.
thanks a lot. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, y'all. Be safe out there.
You too. Stay with us when we return, celebrating all things hazelnuts. This is Matt Nair on air, coming to you across the Civic Media Radio Network. I'm drumming just a minute.
Oh, and she's doing it so
Convincingly?
efficiently.
Good morning. Welcome to Matt Nair on air. So very glad to have you with us. Jane Matt Nair, Greg Bach, coming to you live from our studio in downtown Waukesha. You can always call or text at 844-967-2789. That number again, 844-96.
Party.
Or leave a comment on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and or Twitter.
Hey, Jane.
Yeah.
Hey, Jane. Hey, Jane. Ask me why I played that song.
Zoot Suit Riot?
Yeah, ask me why I played that song.
Why did you play it?
Because I thought I wanted to bring up the Squirrel Nut Zippers. Instead, I brought up the Cherry Poppin' Daddies, and I had no choice but to play that song.
I love that song. That's
Well,
a
there
great
you go.
song. I love that. I have I have music from those guys.
Oh,
I do. I like that. I like that whole vibe. It's very Brian Setzer,
yeah.
kind of Stray Kids.
It was
kind
very,
of
very
thing
fun
going on.
time. For a moment, people were playing big band and wearing big pants.
Speaking of big band, and if you like music, if you are a music fan,
Not a fan.
Lou Regani's Music of the Stars. You can catch it every Sunday morning. He has a massive, massive record collection from 7 a.m. to noon across the Civic Media Network. So if you're getting up for breakfast, getting ready for church, you can turn Lou on Sunday mornings and catch some great music from 7 a.m. to noon all across the Civic Media Radio Network. So much fun having Maggie Dawn here. She's so accomplished.
Yeah.
Seriously, the woman is seriously accomplished, as well as being a lawyer and just a really knowledgeable, wonderful person. So I would love to have her back.
I mean, a guy called within the first segment of her being on, or after the first segment, and said, "You should do this every week, half an hour, ask a lawyer." So seeing the cracklings of something forming here, my friends.
I just think most lay people, and I count myself among them, I don't know that much about the law.
Yeah.
Fortunately, up to this point, my dealings with the legal profession have been fairly limited.
Yep.
So I think lots of us have lots of different questions, and certainly every case is different. And I don't know that you can ask, Maggie specifics about whatever case you might be going through.
Yeah,
But for just for
this isn't a consultation.
no, this isn't free legal aid. But just overall larger questions about the inner workings of the law. And I think
Yeah.
it's the more light we can shed on things, the better off we all are, right?
And that's spreading joy, friends.
Spreading joy and learning stuff. Spreading
Darn.
joy and learning stuff. You were not here last Friday, Greg Bach.
No, I was somewhere else.
You were in Atlanta, but Luke Mather was here when we had Jason Fishbach, part of the Hazelnut Growers of America group, and we learned all about Wisconsin hazelnuts. And I ordered some
Yeah,
and brought them in.
yeah.
I want to do an ode to the Speisel maple hazelnut.
Well, you didn't say
snackers.
that correct at all.
Okay.
Try that again.
An ode to the Midwest grown hazel snackers.
Let me,
The spicy maple hazelnuts will change your life.
wow.
They're really good. You tried some this morning.
I've eaten most of them.
Here, let me put them up to the camera so you can see. And the wonderful people at the American Hazelnut Company, when they saw my order come in, Emma, who was the one who helped me set up the interview, she sent me a note and said, "Oh, we're going to send you some hazelnut oil too." And I'm like, "Well, you don't have to, but I'm not going to say no. So thank you." So I have not used the hazelnut oil yet, but I highly, highly encourage you to check out Wisconsin grown hazelnuts. And if you want to go back and listen to that conversation, which was from last Friday, it's really interesting and just about how it's good ecologically. Growing hazelnuts in Wisconsin is good. It's good for us. It's good for the planet. So it's a very interesting chat that's from last Friday, I believe, at 11:06.
Something I'd really love to know, because it was later in my life, not until in my maybe late 20s, early 30s, was how we are the cranberry capital.
Oh yeah,
I would love to sit down, whether it's Pam Yankee or whomever, and really discuss all those unknown crops that are really well grown in Wisconsin. Things that you maybe not rely on, but we supply a good deal of, not beyond the cheese and
Hey,
whatnot.
we're at like the ginseng cap. We're the
Yeah.
second ginseng capital in the world.
And that is not cheap either. Holy cow. I bought a bunch of ginseng once. I was like, are you serious? It's how much?
Well, and one of the reasons, Greg, is because it is, from what I recall, because we talked to Will Sue, who's a ginseng farmer. It's all hand tended
Oh.
because of the nature of the ginseng. So it's very, very labor intensive. And it sounds like, and I might be wrong, but it sounds like ginseng's a little temperamental.
It has to have its
Don't you-
own trailer.
I hate plants with an attitude. It's just so
Ugh.
annoying. Let's do Laughing Tap, because you
Yeah.
are going to be at Laughing Tap this weekend.
Yes,
if you
I
are
will.
looking for some funny, you
Looking
want
for
to
some
check this
funny.
out.
Now, here's the thing, folks. I get what's going on. I understand the scuttlebutt on the street. I understand what the kids are talking about. They're talking about Packer playoffs.
Sure.
And I know you're going to want to go to that, or you're going to want to watch it. But you can also come to the Laughing Tap either tonight or tomorrow at 10 p.m. and see Jessica Michelle Singleton. She is a paid Comedy Store regular. And when I say Comedy Store,
In Los Angeles,
in
Comedy
Los
Store?
Angeles. Yep. The world famous Comedy Store.
Wow.
She is a paid regular. She's been on a lot of popular podcasts, and she's very funny. She is just so much energy, and she'll be doing 3 shows: 1 tonight, 2 tomorrow, and it is 7:30 tonight, 7:30 tomorrow, 10 p.m. on Saturday as well. All tickets are available at laughingtap.com. Get those tickets. I will say this, Jane.
Yes.
We did raise our prices on tickets.
Okay.
$22 for advance.
That's
$25 at the door.
That's still a great deal.
No drink minimum.
That's still a great deal.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that, so you can go see that Packer game and then come on by the late show and see some comedy, or come tonight because we want to see you down there. Laughingtap.com for all your comedy needs, and Milwaukee Comedy as well, MilwaukeeComedy.com. But come down, say hi to me. I'll be at the front door, checking you in, getting you seated. We'll high five and we'll be buddies.
Speaking of the Packers game, Packers versus the 49ers, 5 o'clock tomorrow night. You can listen on WRJN in Racine, on Kenosha 98.1 FM, and on Park Falls 98.3 FM WCQM. Thank you so very much to Pat Kreitlow and Maggie Dawn. Thank you, Greg Bach. Thank you most of all to all of you for calling and texting and listening. I hope you find some joy and you have the chance to share it. Stay close. You're listening to the Civic Media Radio Network. Have a great weekend.
jitterbugging brown-eyed man, a stray cat from the 98 Beats band. Cut me a Sammy and you'll understand.